Everybody, come quick! Pierre Gasly signed with Alpine, and that surprised nobody. Although the things surrounding Gasly's rehiring have actually caused people to suddenly go, ooh, actually Alpine looks interesting. Because even though Alpine have seriously fumbled the 2024 season, and at one point were dead last in the Constructors' standings, by them simply not doing all that much, they suddenly got themselves back up to 7th place. And also, through sheer good fortune with all of the other teams bringing loads and loads of upgrades, and them not working as intended. But regardless of that fortunate circumstance, Pierre Gasly has confirmed that he is going to be partnering up with Alpine on a multi-year deal. And that in a way he could be seeing this as some sort of project. Him forging his own destiny after leaving AlphaTauri in 2022, and now having survived the intra-team battle that was Gasly and Ocon. Him coming out as the victor, which looked incredibly obvious, quite frankly, since Ocon was doing everything in his power to do a speedrun of how to exit a French team, whilst also being French. In any case, this is what Gasly has to say about all this. Ahem. I've been officially here for over 18 months, and it has always been the plan to build a long-term project with the team. While on track it's been a challenging season so far, I remain faithful to the project, and I am not going anywhere. I am happy with the changes made, the hard work, and the direction the team is taking. There is a lot of potential in this team's personnel and resources. I'm excited for what is to come in the future, and right now I'm focusing on the everyday details that we are putting in to improve our performances. Yeah, I think no one was really surprised that Gasly was going to be staying with Alpine, because in my video I made a couple of months ago about why Pierre Gasly really had no choice. He really had no choice. Pierre Gasly is just confirming what he had already said over the last few months, and how he's been playing the team game in trying to come out as the victor in the battle between he and Ocon as to who gets to lead the team and who's going to be staying with that team going into 2025 and the brand new regulations. Was Pierre really going to be staying had things not happened in the last few weeks, with them actually scoring points now? Because 3 races ago, they had barely scored any, and now we've actually had them score 3 races on the trot, which is surprising, and then being relatively solid 9th and 10th. We all thought that Aston Martin would have been that at worst, maybe even Mercedes, but now Alpine have consistently been collecting points, and now Racing Bulls has suddenly dropped really hard. Alpine might get back to 6th if they bring McLaren-like upgrades, since they are basically copying McLaren's rulebook, and who knows, they might actually be able to make good on what Gasly has been talking about. And it's quite clear that Pierre Gasly, now having won against Ocon, and is going to be there for the long term, since I still can't believe it, Pierre Gasly is nearly 30. He still looks like a baby, and I just still feel like he's only just entered F1, but no, he's been around the sport for, wow, 7 years, almost as long as Lance Stroll, and has almost as many Grand Prix starts, yet has actually done a lot more for the sport. And also, I just feel like he deserves this. He deserves the chance to actually forge a project and build up Alpine into a really solid unit. And yes, it's been an absolutely torrid time of it as of late, you know, with Alpine sacking somebody once every week, but now Alpine's been keeping people. And now with Gasly staying there, they might actually be able to keep on quite a few more people and actually bring more people to Enston, especially since now it's looking likely that the Renault-owned team might not actually be sticking with their own engines, with the Viry-Châtillon side of things being sent elsewhere to maybe work on something else, and now a Mercedes deal potentially being lined up for 2026. And many mutterings have been going on as to the exact role of Flavio Briatore, as to why he's there, aside from him being an executive advisor, with some people thinking he's some sort of valuation guy, that maybe he's seeing whether or not it's even worth Renault staying at all, and maybe just pulling out entirely and selling the entire operation lock, stock and barrel to another entity. But either way, he has made waves in the last week, and even though I personally think it's not one of the most logical decisions, it's actually come out good, because he's basically taken the reins in absolutely everything. He's almost become like some sort of director of the team. Bruno Faman, I've not heard from the guy since Briatore lined himself up as the executive advisor, or the French version of Helmut Marko, even though Flavio is Italian. I do feel like something's going on here, and Alpine's starting to transform itself into something intriguing. And quite clearly, the rumours surrounding Alpine are now pointing out a last-minute deal for Carlos Sainz. I know, it's a Gasly video, but you've got to be wondering, why did Gasly decide to sign now? Because there's still a lot of time in the season. It's not even the summer break yet. That's not for a good few more weeks yet. He could have used that time to ruminate and decide about his decisions, but no, he's sticking with Alpine. And something that Briatore must have said has gotten him intrigued, because we're not too sure about who his teammate will be. But it could be Sainz, because it looked really obvious that he was going to be signing with Williams, and then the announcement was delayed, as many people were thinking, and then suddenly Briatore came in with like a, wait, before you sign something, Carlos, take a look at what we can offer you. The terms of the deal aren't quite clear yet, but there's clearly something going on that Briatore can show Carlos and his team, and trust me, Carlos and his team have seen many contracts over the last few months, or several months actually, so if this were to even get through the door, there must be something good. Alpine must be cooking something, some kind of deal. Maybe they might be brokering that Mercedes engine deal after all, and that maybe Carlos might get to go back to a team which he has experience with from 2017 and 2018 when he was part of that deal to allow Christian Horner to eschew the Renault engines from the Toro Rosso team so he can then start the Honda project before he went to McLaren in 2019. That could be good, familiarity, somewhat. Team Enstone hasn't really changed all that much in terms of the facilities, although it will be soon. So going back to a team which he remembers from his earlier days in F1 might be useful, and if he's able to get the Mercedes engine in the back of that car anyway, that might actually be better than going to Williams, because right now, Williams, we don't know where they are right now. Sure, they're a couple of years ahead of Sauber, so at the moment, Williams look better than Sauber and Audi, because that's quite vague in of itself, as I said in my video from yesterday. But at the same time, Alpine are ahead of Williams, and we're going into a brand new regulation cycle. Alpine does have the facilities and has the backing, as well as major investment, to actually make it happen a little bit more sooner than Williams could. Gasly's been signed, and Carlos might be signed to go with Sainz and Gasly. That would immediately improve public relations amongst the F1 fandom, because Carlos Sainz is extremely popular, Pierre Gasly is even more popular. They would have a really solid lineup, which in terms of social media will be just as potent as Gasly Ocon, because both of those men knew how to work social media, especially Instagram. And right now, with this brand new wave of F1 fans, and of course Alpine have made some really bad moves and had really bad discord and just uncertainty for its future, this could only be an absolute win. And if they can pull off this deal, then Briatore, even though I personally don't agree with the guy, would have already justified his position as coming back to that team. He would have been able to acquire Carlos Sainz, the most indecisive driver in Formula 1 at the moment, with a vest pocket maneuver. That would have been the coup of the century, denying James Vowles his opportunity to have such a solid driver. But according to rumour, James does have potentially either Valtteri Bottas lined up or Felipe Drugovich, so the last Brazilian in F1 was a Felipe. The next one would also be a Felipe, perhaps? I mean, I'd be okay with it. Drugovich at Williams alongside Albon, that would be good, and Brazil would love you forever, James, if you did that, so it's not an entirely big loss. But Sainz and Gasly, ooh, okay. I mean, of course, Gasly Tsunoda would be cute and wholesome, and Gasly still has Tsunoda's back, of course. He hopes that he can get that Red Bull deal, even though Gasly himself couldn't, because obviously he's starting to see Yuki in himself now and how he's being denied and then snubbed, and then also there's the Lawson stuff, and I'll get to that in a future video. And if you definitely want it, do be sure to drop a like and maybe subscribe for that video when it drops. But it just feels like a really interesting moment in Alpine's history. If this works out and they can actually get Sainz alongside Gasly, that would be a really solid lineup. And I feel like there must be something behind this to justify to Carlos that, wait, before you sign with Toto's second team, we can provide you something that's a little bit further down the line than that team as well. Because we got to remember, Alpine have only just had a really bad season, and we're going into 2026 in 18 months. All of this could change absolutely again. This was the best time if Alpine were to have a sudden slump for this to happen. And we've got to remember, McLaren slumped really badly at the end of 2022 and in 2023, and they just soared right back up again. This could happen with Alpine as well, and Sainz would be back at a place where he recognizes the situation. He would be familiar with Gasly from his Red Bull Junior days. It might be a really solid lineup, and even though we have got an Alpine private test next week for Doohan and Schumacher in case they can't get Carlos Sainz, I do feel like Alpine are in a position where they might actually start to gain some credibility again, and it all started with securing Pierre. If they couldn't get that first part of the plan in motion and secure Gasly's services for the long term, I personally think he will remain there for at least another 2-3 years, especially if the car ends up being really good. I reckon that Alpine probably would have sold up immediately. Briatore would have realised, well, we can't get somebody of Gasly's calibre anymore. We can't keep Gasly. We won't get Sainz. We do have Doohan and Schumacher. They might be good contingencies, but they are relative unknowns. And then I think they would definitely have been sold up because, you know, Alpine is still worth $1 billion and the investors might get some return on their investment from last year. But it just feels like a really pivotal moment. And so far, Briatore has made the first part of his plan work, keeping Gasly. Okay. Now he's got to work on the next part in maybe getting that Mercedes deal. And part of securing Gasly and also halting Sainz's proceedings with James Vowles might mean that that deal could easily happen, because I don't think Toto would say no to more money coming in, as well as also some more R&D. But I'm not quite sure what the relationship would be between Toto and Flavio, even though they do have a really good friendship, as far as I believe. They might be able to get some sort of deal like McLaren have in dictating how the Mercedes engine is developed, or it might be just a simple technical partnership with Williams. And also, that would make Williams sort of less special, because Williams and Alpine would be relatively the same, but Alpine does have more resources, it does have a little bit more capital, it has the backing of Renault. But even then, Renault's in a situation where we're like, well, we got this team and we want to promote our Alpine cars, but they're not powered by our own engines. But at the same time, we don't want to spend money on an engine no one's going to buy. We might be quids in, maybe? So it just feels like a really tricky situation for Renault and Alpine, because they might benefit in gaining some more prestige and reputation. But one thing's for sure, Renault, in terms of an engine supplier, will be pretty much done unless they can actually get the 2026 power unit up in motion. And that would be a crying shame in terms of a historian's perspective in F1, because they've been around, well, since the 70s to some extent, and that would be a historic power unit gone. But, you know, needs must in a way. But Gasly being there, okay, they've gotten the first part in motion, which makes me think they're in progress with all the other stuff. And I do feel like Gasly has made a decent decision, because, yeah, sure, he could have gone to Sauber, and he could have easily led the team alongside Hülkenberg. That would have been a solid lineup in of itself. But there are just so many uncertainties there, and the perks that they could potentially offer, because according to other rumours, they were preparing to offer an ambassadorial deal for Carlos Sainz for life. It just feels like Alpine's got a lot more together right now, because they've gone through the pain, you know, Alpine, at the beginning of this year. And right now, they don't really have to bring in major upgrades, because all of the other teams have proven around them that they might not always work. So you've got to pick and choose when you bring them, get to know the car, which is what Gunther Steiner did to some effect, even though it didn't always work. But at the same time, you just have to shave weight off the car. Because as Williams said, if they can sort out their 15-kilo overweight car, they can save about half a second. All Alpine have to do is make the car lighter, and if they can make the car even lighter, they can then add ballast, and then they can dictate the balance of the car, and that might improve the car in of itself. We might actually have a car, the Alpine, the A524, which might be a solid machine if they can just make it more nimble and agile in the corners. I don't expect them to do well at the Red Bull Ring this weekend, but I do hold some hope, because the Spanish Grand Prix is a good litmus test in terms of how good a car can be. And the Alpine wasn't terrible. It was the 5th fastest car at some points. So there might be some hope for that team, and maybe Gasly was right to stick with them. And maybe Sainz might be looking at that result especially, as well as what Briatore's got on the docket, and thinking, you know what, I might save myself a couple of years of waiting around for some solid results again. Sure, I don't expect podiums from Alpine anytime soon, but I do expect them to be in the points consistently if they can keep this up, and they can actually copy McLaren's textbook to the letter, because that's what they're basically doing right now. Their technical structure, their hirings, and their upgrade path eventually might be just what McLaren are doing right now, just changing the concept and going steady, softly. So either way, I do feel like Gasly now has some choice as to what his future will be. And okay, Flavio, all right, well played. I will give you credit where credit is due. That's a mantra of mine, my friend. Even if you don't like the person, even if you don't agree with what they believe in and their preferences, or their past, if they do something well that impresses you, give them credit. Like, if I've got somebody I like and they don't do something I like, I will be critical. You got to be balanced sometimes. But either way, I'm intrigued about this. And Gasly confirming himself does offer up some opportunities. But either way, I'm going to be working on another video for later today, so do stick around for that one. But in the meantime, check out maybe this video as to Esteban Ocon and why that was just destined to fail. And sorry, Esty, you got to find another place.